Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and with the FIA potentially making changes to help Mercedes next season, they've also confirmed that they have many further upgrades in their locker that may well be deployed virtually every single race from now until the end of the season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, let's talk about the Daniel Ricciardo Oscar Piastri situation. It seems to have been practically confirmed today, what we've theorized the last few days. The Ricciardo will indeed be gone from McLaren next season and Oscar Piastri will take his place. We talked about the rumours that Piastri wants to go to McLaren, doesn't want to go to Alpine, might settle for a reserve seat even at McLaren for 1 year, but you know, Ricciardo at that point knows that he's gone the next year for Piastri, probably wants to get out there sooner than that. Apparently today, McLaren have told Daniel Ricciardo, this I believe is coming from 3 separate sources across 2 different continents, certainly the Australian media are heavily reporting this, that they've told him like, look, yeah, you haven't really performed, it's not working out this season, we're going to move you on and pay what would be a pretty significant buyout, you'd imagine, from his contract that ends next season to let him go and bring Piastri in sooner. This has been noticed because apparently the FIA's contract recognition board has validated this new contract, right? So apparently what's happened here, and it's kind of a complicated situation, but it's clear that Alpine have rather fumbled the bag on this, especially because it was only a couple of days ago they put the tweet out, which is still live on their Twitter account, that says, yes, Oscar Piastri will be driving for us next season. And Piastri's like, no, that's not the case at all. And I was kind of wondering, would Piastri do that and say, I will not be driving for Alpine next season if there wasn't already another arrangement in place? And apparently, by the time he actually put that tweet out there, he'd already signed his McLaren deal, which has now been validated, and clearly Alpine were none the wiser. So I've no idea what they've been doing, sleeping at the wheel, I'd imagine. But yeah, Australian sources are adamant that Ricciardo has been informed of his de-hiring and that a soft landing is being sought for him. So they want to find him another seat. It would make sense if he were to return it to Alpine. There are potentially another team on the table we'll talk about later today, but it would make sense for him to go back to Renault. Yes, the relationship there when he left wasn't exactly cordial, but still that's the most likely landing spot at the present time, right? But yes, apparently the F1 contracts are checked for their validity, and it's said to have validated Piastri's new contract with McLaren, the kind of contract recognition board at the FIA. So this is what has been leaked at the moment, and they understand that he has a contract with Alpine for 2022, but not for 2023. His 2022 deal is said to contain an option on Piastri's services for next year, but that option was not exercised within the required 30 days of signing that contract. So whether there's this whole conspiracy going on where Alonso and even Vettel were getting involved with Mark Webber and Andreas Seidel and having a kind of discussion saying, okay, I'll announce my move to Aston Martin on this date, and therefore that's going to be after the 31st of July, at which point Piastri's contract is now void, therefore they can sign on for McLaren. So it does seem like Mark Webber's played a bit of a masterclass here as Piastri's manager, if that's what they've been able to execute on. But apparently under Formula 1's regulations, Alpine cannot challenge this. They said that legally they think they're in the right, that they can just promote Piastri to their driver and he has to do it because he's under contract. Apparently that's not necessarily the case, and the FIA have said, actually, yeah, no, this contract is valid, he's going to drive for McLaren. So that's seemingly what's going on. It's honestly an absolute mess, right? Formula 1 never fails to disappoint. But yes, Ricciardo will not be in the McLaren seat next year, to the best of our understanding. He will be going elsewhere, and Piastri and Norris will be the driver pairing. Definitely an exciting one, given Norris's recent performance in that car, and of course the hype around Piastri, only exacerbated by all the drama around Piastri the last few days. So a return to Alpine does seem the most likely for Ricciardo. Otmar actually said recently that, look, he's happy to bring Ricciardo back if it comes to that, and that maybe he'll be more comfortable in that car. And in fairness, right now Alpine marginally above McLaren, I believe, still in the Constructors' Championships, fighting over 4th place. It's not like Ricciardo's taken a massive step back in terms of the performance of the car, theoretically, but yeah, it'd be pretty frustrating for him, I'm sure, to get booted out. But in fairness, they did say that they were going to stand by Ricciardo, that being the McLaren guys, but they also did say, look, all we expect from him is to perform at the same level as Lando, and of course, that has not been the case so far this year. Let's talk about the Mercedes situation. First of all, with the regulation changes for next season. So of course, there's the technical directive coming in from Spa that Mercedes believe might give them an advantage by the flexi floor ban that's coming through that apparently Red Bull and Ferrari are exploiting. I think Mattia Binotto from Ferrari said that it might affect them a bit. Christian Horner is pretty adamant that it's not going to affect Red Bull's pace at all, but it's next year's regulation changes to combat the porpoising that we saw, especially at the start of this year, that are causing a fair bit of controversy. Apparently, the teams have have agreed a compromise with the FIA to eliminate car bouncing next year, to raise the floor edges of the cars by 15mm. Now, initially, I think the FIA proposed a raise of 25mm, and Christian Horner and Mattia Binotto and other teams were not happy at all, because they've already developed next year's car to quite a certain extent, and if the floor edges have to be raised by 25mm, that changes the aerodynamics of the car a lot, how they can generate the downforce. They've got to redesign elements of the car in order to compensate for that. So they were saying, okay, look, maybe we can do a compromise here where the changes aren't incredibly fundamental, but yet still will potentially reduce bouncing for next season. So effectively forcing the floor edges to be raised up, which should reduce the bouncing effect in theory. So the suggestion earlier on this year from the FIA was 25mm raising of the floor edges. Apparently the teams have decided to go to 15mm. But Christian Horner and others had some quite spicy words to say on this. Effectively, they're like, look, the FIA is just trying to help Mercedes here. And I think this might have been one of the things that Mercedes proposed earlier this season when they were talking to the FIA, like, okay, how do we combat the porpoising? They were apparently proposing the idea of, okay, what if you just force the floor edges to be raised for next season, and therefore other teams, the likes of Red Bull, are like, hang on a second here, are you sure you just want to be taking Mercedes ideas at face value? Because that might, they might have realized it's going to benefit them more than it might benefit other teams. So no guarantees this is going to make any difference in their pecking order next season, but it does seem like Mercedes have got their wish to a certain extent. If, of course, this comes true, and maybe the whole protest, the legal protest that Binotto was talking about not too long ago, was that, potentially is not going to happen anymore if the teams have agreed to this compromise effectively, but it might still favour some teams more than others. Speaking of Mercedes, of course, the Hungarian Grand Prix was probably their most successful of the season so far. A double podium at the end of the weekend. All 6 of the top cars finished the race. Yes, there were some strategic question marks by Ferrari, but still, all 6 of the top cars finished, and they got a double podium at the end of the day. And also, of course, the pole position was a massive step forward for Mercedes as well. Many interesting comments on this. I'll kind of take you guys through it. First of all, exactly how they achieved that pole position. Apparently, they went for a very much less conservative approach to their setup, really, with the car, to, have a setup that strains the tyre harder, because getting the tyres in the right window, as they like to say, has been a challenge for Mercedes so far, getting them up to the right temperature. They reckon that effectively they went much less conservative than usual, got the tyres up to a good temperature, and delivered a great lap right, and they were kind of surprised how good it was, but then they were concerned, like, okay, we've kind of set up here for quali, getting the temperatures into the tyres. Does that mean we're going to cause higher tyre degradation in the race than our rivals? That was a possibility, and that might have been the case to a certain degree. George Russell stint, right, after 31 laps towards the end of the mediums, he definitely was falling off the curve a little bit, so maybe they've got to think about that, but it does seem like Mercedes have found a way to elevate their performance in qualifying, and then maybe not hurt their kind of race performance so much as a result. So that does sound like a key piece of understanding that they have gained, but this is the other side of the story, right, in terms of going into Spa, what they can potentially expect from the W13. They say none of the changes turned our car into a rocket, it was rather the setup and understanding of the car which was enriched in Budapest with a few new lessons. Chauvelin's conclusion, one of the head engineers, we had the tyres in the right window, others did not. He goes on to say bouncing is no longer an issue at all, but contrary to the Wintel specifications, of course they had to, change a few things around to actually stop the bouncing earlier this season in Spain, for example, right? And then no, they will bring further upgrades from there. So they had to lose a bit of lap time in terms of what they were theorizing could be possible by, to try and get rid of the porpoising, which they achieved, and now it's about gaining that lap time back, right? So in terms of developments, they might be slightly further behind where the other teams are, which means they have more room to improve potentially. So the article goes on to describe that they will bring a number of steps after the summer break and bring modifications to virtually every race. They've not made like a massive step or a massive upgrade in quite some time, but they have made some small progress edging out lap time to the front runners over the last few races, and that will be expected to continue. As Chauvelin goes on to say, we still have a lot in our quiver, right? A lot in the bag that can potentially pull out. Nothing spectacular, but things that take us further. We no longer turn in circles, but now we move forward continuously, also with the setup as well. So they're rather confident of that. Of course, if that can help them unlock a few more tenths as the season progresses, race by race, making the car quicker and quicker, like they could have the fastest car at the end of the year, especially with the theories about the technical directive that will ban the flexi floors. As I said, Binotto says probably won't affect Ferrari too much. Christian Horner definitely says it's not going to affect Red Bull, but the theory is that these flexible floors enable the teams to run the car lower without having to worry about effectively, to cushion the shock from the road, I think is the idea, right? If the plank is flat on the bottom of the car, they can't get away with the wear of it hitting the floor, whereas if it flexes a bit, they can get away with running the car ride height lower, and that seems to be what the FIA figured out. They were kind of exploiting that loophole loophole in the rules. But yeah, the theory goes, if it's no longer possible to leave air or insulation material between the chassis floor and plank to cushion the shocks from the roads, the competitors will be forced to ride the car higher. According to the simulation, 6mm of a ride height raise could cost 2 to 3 tenths of a second, which is what Mercedes are looking for in terms of lacking to win. So right now they think that from Spa, Red Bull and Ferrari might have to raise their ride height by about 6mm. That does not seem like much, but with the ground effect that is generating the downforce on these newer spec Formula 1 cars could cost them 2 to 3 tenths of a second. Mercedes say that's what they'd have to do if they were using this exploit. Will Red Bull and Ferrari have to do the same thing? I suppose that remains to be seen, but definitely some optimism in the Mercedes camp for the latter half of the season, and whether they can deliver a car that Lewis Hamilton can take to win a race, of course, because he holds the record and wants to break the record of Schumacher this season to actually have won a race in every single season of 16 seasons he's competed in Formula 1, then, well, he's going to need the car to do exactly that, but he is getting ever closer, of course, over these last few races. And just to mention this here to close out the video, because this season, honestly, despite the fact that Ferrari probably have the fastest car, is the second biggest points gap ever going into a summer break. Vettel back in 2011 holds the record. I think, honestly, the gap might have been similar or higher with Hamilton in 2020, but there wasn't really a summer break that year because, of course, the season was a complete mess. But despite the relative competitiveness of the cars, this lead is no doubt substantial. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.